Editor's note. There is barely any background music in this chapter. If I were to do a watch along where I would take notes for future what ifs, would you guys be a part of it? The Legend Reborn by Scotamus. Chapter 2. Ostracized and Hated. A wooden door opened and creating a loud boom that echoed through the Xiaolong residence. Yang came stomping through the entrance of her house with a deep frown on her face. As she started to stomp her way up the stairs, Tai Yang came hastily after her. Yang, come on, look, I know you're frustrated, but you shouldn't give up just because you're having a rough time with training. Yang stopped at the foot of the stairs. She then turned to her father. I'm having a rough time because I'm fucking exhausted, because I haven't gotten any amount of decent sleep. Yang bawled at her father. Yang, you have to push through it. Just think about it. If you train, then you'll be able to get some actual sleep because you'll be so tired. Again, you're not listening, damn it. I'm not getting sleep because I'm not tired enough. Trust me, I am plenty tired. The problem is this damn pain that keeps me awake at night. That pain doesn't really exist, Yang. It's all in your head. The training will keep your mind off of it by making you focus on something else. Now how can you sit there and tell me what I'm feeling isn't real? What I'm feeling is very damn real. This pain in my arm is fucking real. Also, to make matters worse, I'm now getting horrible headaches. Yang spat as her crimson eyes started to give a terrifying glow. Tai Yang gulped. Those red eyes looked so much like Raven's, especially the glowing. Raven's eyes always glowed when she was angry about something. Typically, this was the only warning you get before she took action and made you suffer for your transgression. It would appear this was one more thing that his daughter took after her mother. Really, it was rather scary how similar mother and daughter were. Tai Yang looked at his daughter. He would have to choose his words carefully. Any wrong word or misconstructed sentence could set his fiery girl off. He would have to try to settle her down. An idea popped into his head. Yang, maybe a nice hot bath would do you some good and help you relax. Tai Yang walked past his daughter and stopped halfway up the stairs. He looked back down at his daughter. Yang? His daughter looked up at him. He could really notice the bags under her angry red eyes now that they weren't training. A twinge of pain shot through his heart at the sight of his daughter's own exhaustion. I'll run the water and prepare the bath for you, okay? After that, I'll get lunch ready, he said with a soft, calm, disarming voice. Yang let out a sigh as she closed her eyes and pinched the bridge of her nose. Fine, I'll be in my room. Tai Yang watched as his daughter walked past him. He was surprised that this worked. He normally did this with Raven when she was very upset about something, which was rare since Raven was usually very composed and had good control over her emotion, though she was far easier to irritate when she was pregnant with Yang. Tai Yang smiled as he made his way up the stairs. I'll come get you when your bath is ready. Fine, whatever, Yang mumbled softly. Yang was now left alone with her thoughts once again. Truth be told, she could really use a bath. She didn't exactly smell great, and the hot water would do wonders for her aching muscles. Perhaps after her bath and eating lunch, she would be able to take a nap or something. A full stomach and a hot bath would usually put her out. She felt something pass by her legs. When she looked down, she found Zwei looking up at her with his tongue hanging out from the side of his mouth. He stood up on his hind legs and put his paws on her leg. It appeared that Zwei wanted to play. However, Yang wasn't in the mood, and she was much too tired to play with her furry little friend. Sorry, Zwei. Maybe some other time, okay, buddy? He let out a small whine. He then turned around and stepped onto his small bed that he himself brought into Yang's room and lay down on. Normally, Zwei slept downstairs in the living room, but ever since Yang had been experiencing her mystery bouts of pain, he had thought it was necessary to sleep in the same room as her in an effort to make her feel better. He didn't understand what was happening to her, but that wouldn't stop him from trying to make his friend feel better. Yang felt a little bad for turning Zwei down. She knew what he was trying to do, and she truly appreciated it, but she was too tired to play with him. I have to make it up to the little guy. I think maybe after I nap, I'll feed him his favorite meal, she thought with a smile on her face. Zwei looked up at her, and upon seeing her smile, his ear instantly perked up. He threw his head back and let out a small, goofy-sounding howl, causing Yang to giggle at his silliness. A small knock on Yang's door caused the blonde to bring her attention to the door. See her father smiling softly at her. Your bath is ready, sweetheart. I'll start making your lunch now. Alright, Dad, Yang said as she rose up from her bed. Before she started making her way towards the door, she made her way over to Zwei to bend down and give him a light kiss on the top of his head. to which he gave an ecstatic bark in response to his friend's show of affection. As Yang walked up to her door, Taeyang held out a towel for her. "Thanks," she said as she moved past her father to the bathroom where her bath is. When Yang closed the bathroom door, Taeyang turned his attention to Zwei. He moved over to Zwei's bed and kneeled down on one knee. "Good job, Zwei. You're a good boy for making her feel better," he said while petting the top of Zwei's head. Taeyang rose up and walked out of his daughter's room. Making his way downstairs, he began thinking about what kind of meal to make for his little girl. When he came to the foot of the stairs, he made a sharp turn to walk back to the kitchen. When he stopped in front of the large set of doors, he reached out with both of his hands to grab the door's handle and turned them to swing the door open to reveal a comically large pantry that was stocked with enough food that it could possibly feed a small village. Anyone who didn't know his family would say that he went completely overboard with the amount of food he kept. This might be true with normal families, but his family was not normal. He had 2 girls that ate more than their appetite let on. This was doubly true for his eldest daughter. Yang normally ate a lot. RWBY ate a lot of food too, but his sister practically ate twice as much as her. But of course she did. Yang was made of much sturdier thing, had more muscles, was bigger and broader in comparison to RWBY's scrawnier body. Whatever Taeyang would decide to make for his daughter, he had to make sure it was a substantial meal. Well, substantial by Yang's standards. Even though she was going through a slump, she still ate as much as she normally ate, even if she tended to pick at her food more often now. I know what to make," he said with a clap. His smile widened with excitement as he made his way over to various different spices. After taking what he needed, Taeyang turned and exited the pantry, closing the door with his foot. Putting the first set of ingredients on the counter, he made his way to the freezer to open it. Peering down the freezer, he spied a large bag of sirloin. After taking out the frozen meat and placing it on the counter, he went about the kitchen to gather the various other ingredients that he required. Yang is gonna love this. Yang opened the bathroom door with steam rolling out from behind her. Stretching her arms over her head as far as her body would allow her, she let out a moan of contentment. Man, that bath was awesome. Really needed that. Before she could even think about making her way to her room, the smell of sizzling meat caught her attention. Closing her eyes, she put her nose up and sniffed the air once. Wow, whatever Dad is making smells delicious. As the scent became more prominent, her mouth began to water and her stomach let out a loud rumble. Wiping her mouth clean of saliva, Yang hastily decided that she would go to the kitchen and see what the origin of the delicious aroma that now filled her nose. After reaching the foot of the stairs, Yang excitedly turned to the kitchen. She was now quite literally following her nose and her stomach. The sound of sizzling meat echoed through the kitchen. She walked behind her father and stood on her toes to look over his shoulders to see what was making the wondrous smell that was entrailing her through her. "What you making, Dad?" Taeyang smiled. "Your favorite, sirloin steak with garlic butter." "Really? When is it gonna be done?" Yang said with childish excitement and impatience. Taeyang chuckled at his daughter's childishness. "It's about to be done now, so why don't you go and take a seat and I'll bring it to you." As soon as the last word left his mouth, his daughter hurried her way to the simple wooden table that sat on the other end of the kitchen. "Oh, and Yang?" "Yeah?" asked the blonde as she was starting to pull the seat out. "You're drooling," Taeyang said with a shit-eating grin. Embarrassed, Yang quickly grabbed a nearby napkin and wiped her mouth quickly. Taking her seat, she leaned back, placing her arm in her lap, waiting patiently for her father to bring her food. After a few minutes of waiting, Taeyang placed a large plate that held several large sirloins in front of her. Yang immediately dug into her food with startling vigor. Taeyang smiled as he took a seat across from his daughter. It made him happy to see his daughter in such a good mood. However, something caught his eye. Yang's eyes weren't their normal lilac color. They were crimson like her mother. Is she mad at me or something? She certainly doesn't seem mad. After a few moments, Taeyang had finally decided to ask his daughter what was wrong. "Yang?" Yang let out a hum of acknowledgement as she continued to stuff her face full of the scrumptious meat. Are you mad at something?" Taeyang asked carefully, lacing his fingers together on the table. Yang looked up at her father with puffy cheeks filled with food. She blinked several times before swallowing her food. "No, not really. Why do you ask?" Yang asked with a raised brow. "Well, it's because I've just noticed your eyes are red. Normally they're like that when you're mad or when your semblance is active." Yang placed her fork and knife down. She then laid her arms flat down on the table while looking at her lap. I woke up like this. Huh? Taeyang asked with a bewildered face. It's like I said. I woke up like this. I tried turning my eyes back to normal, but it didn't work. I don't know why my eyes change. I don't know why they won't change back. Yang looked up at the ceiling. Taking a deep breath, she locked eyes with her father. She brought her left arm to grab her right shoulder. I don't know what's happening to me at all, she said with a tremble in her voice. Taeyang reached over and gently grabbed the right arm of her prosthetic. You know what, Yang? It doesn't matter. No point in trying to figure something out when we just don't have the tools to do so. We'll just be running in circles trying. So just try to focus on what you can control. Go ahead and finish your meal. I'll do the dishes after you're done. Okay. She felt something gently shake her from her shoulders. Yang groggily opened her eyes and turned her head to the left to see her father peering down at her. Yang, I need you to go into town and get me a few things. I would go, but I need to make a few calls to signal for something about work. Oh, come on, Dad. I really don't feel like being around people. Come on, Yang. It won't take long at all for you to do this, and we really need these things. Besides, you need to get out of the house a little more often, and not stay cooped up in your room so much. Fine, Yang said while rolling her eyes. Good. Here's the list. Also, you can take Zwei with you. I'm sure he would love to go for a walk. After her father left her room, Yang sat up on her bed. I really don't want to do this, she thought solemnly. Sighing in resignation, she finally stood up from her bed to put her jacket on and squeeze her feet into her shoes. Might as well get this over with. Come on, Zwei. Me and you are going to town, said the hunters in training, while giving a small wave towards Zwei. Yang made her way downstairs with Zwei trailing her. Reaching the bottom, she walked towards the coffee table in the living room to grab a pair of house keys. Reaching the front door, she pulled it open to have the late afternoon breeze hit her face. Walking through the doorway, she stopped on the porch to allow Zwei to follow her. Once Zwei made it outside, she closed the door and locked it. Yang walked onto the path towards the forest that led her to the town. She hoped this wouldn't take too long. It would take at least 40 minutes to get to her destination, and she was thankful that the Grim never showed up along the path. She looked down at her left to see Zwei happily trotting alongside her, with his mouth slightly ajar and tongue hanging out. She brought her eyes forward once more with a small smile on her face. The blonde always thought it was cute to see Zwei moving his tiny legs, and the way he bobbed his head as he walked was a little funny. Well, at least I got you to keep me company, you cute little ball of fur. After 40 minutes of walking, Yang and Zwei finally arrived at their destination. The town of Burn was one of the most successful settlements outside of the walls, and that was because of all the hunters that worked as signal. They kept the Beowulfs at bay. Entering the town through the large gate, Yang could see the town was still as busy as ever. People moving around from store to store, buying everything that they needed. Others were moving around materials that were important to the town, while others just simply stood around conversing with each other as their children ran around playing with one another. After walking a few dozen yards in Burm, Yang noticed something. It was quiet now, far too quiet for a town this size. She slowed down to a standstill, and she moved her head from side to side to see what was causing what sounded like a sound from Burm's resident. What she found disturbed her terribly. They were all staring at her. No, not staring, but outright glaring at her with flares of anger and hate in their eyes. Gulping, she began walking again, taking cautious steps forward as she kept moving her eyes from side to side. She could feel all of her anxiety coming back at full blast, her heart beating heavily in her chest as she continued towards the store. All of her instinct was telling her to run very far away. She began to pick up her pace from slow and cautious to being a step down from jogging. She wanted to get whatever her father needed quickly and leave because she didn't think she could stay under the townsfolk's hated glares for much longer. Finally, she came in front of the shop and she hastily opened the door to enter. If Yang thought she would receive any kind of reprieve, then she was sorely mistaken. The store owner stepped in front of her as soon as she had taken a few steps to the store. Folding his arms to his chest, the middle-aged man barked, "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Yang looked up to see the store owner's hateful eyes peering down at her. I just wanted to get something from my dad, she said meekly. The store owner twisted his face into a deep frown. Oh, hell no! Your father wants something from here, then he can come by himself and buy them. I ain't doing business with a filthy criminal. He spat at Yang, spittle from his mouth landing on her jacket. What? Criminal? Yeah, criminal. You think we'd forget what you did to that poor boy at the tournament? You're a fucking animal! A woman from the crowd that had gathered beside Yang in the store yelled. Get out of here, you unhinged bitch! A man from the same crowd yelled. We don't want your kind here at all! An old woman screamed. Yang began to feel panic creeping up her spine as the whole store was now filled with angry shouts from people yelling derogatory insults at her. She felt her chest tighten, causing her breathing to quicken to a pace just below hyperventilation. Yang started to walk backward weakly, her whole body shaking in panic. A few steps back, as she felt herself bump into someone. She slowly turned her head to see what she had bumped into. It was a rather large man, with a graying beard and a scar across his nose. Trembling, she looked up to see the large man looking down at her. His face twisted with anger and disgust. He spoke with a rough baritone voice. You heard these people. Get out! But please, I just want to buy some things for my dad. The man's eye widened in anger. He lifted his right arm and grabbed Yang's head with his massive hand, completely engulfing her head. Yang let out a scream of terror as he lifted her up. I said, get out! He yelled, throwing Yang out of the store as soon as his last syllable left his mouth. Screaming as she was flying through the air, she let out an oomph of pain as she landed in a puddle of mud face first, creating a loud splash. She spat out the mud that had entered her mouth and she began to prop herself up with her elbows. When she looked up, all she could see were people of Brim beginning to gather across from her. Her eyes frantically moved from one another crowd to the other. These people were yelling and screaming at the top of her lungs. She saw movement in peripheral, and when she turned her head to see what had caught her attention, she felt something hit her forehead. Yang looked down to see what had hit her, and what she saw was a rock. She could feel something trickling down her forehead, just above her right eye. Yang reached up with her left hand to wipe her forehead, only to find when she brought it back down, to see that it was stained with blood. Her blood. Yang's eye flew open, and her mouth opened in a wide O shape, as she felt a heavy boot crash across her body, the blow landing just below her breast. After landing on the ground with a thud, her body bounced several times before coming to a stop. Yang is gasping in pain as she clenched her body. She curled her body into a ball as she was writhing. As the pain began to pass away, she brought her head up to see her attacker. It was the same man that had thrown her out of the store. She could already feel it. The blow he had given her would definitely leave an ugly bruise. What the fuck are you still doing here? Please, please stop, she coughed out, desperately pleading with her attacker to spare her from any more pain. He walked over to her with the long strides. He stopped a few inches from her face. Looking down, he sneered as he reached down to grab a fistful of her hair from her ponytail, lifting her up to his face. Yang screamed in agony. She reached up with both her arm and her prosthetic to keep the man's hand from desperately dislodging the grip of her hair. Stop? Stop? What stopped you from kneecapping that boy? He bellowed in her face. Yang continued her desperate struggle, but the man was simply too strong, and her aura and semblance wasn't responding due to her frightened and panicked mind. I think you need to be taught a lesson, you little filthy brat. As he brought his fist up, Yang closed her eyes. Please, please, no more. Just leave me alone, the blonde begged as tears began to stream down her face. Oh, I'll leave you alone, all right, he sneered, a wicked grin spreading across his face. I'll leave you alone after I'm done beating you half to death. Before his fist could come into contact, he felt something bite down on his arm that was holding up Yang. He yelled in agony while dropping Yang onto the ground. After a few moments of being dropped, Yang looked up to see what caused her attacker to drop her. She saw that Zwei was firmly lashed onto his arm. She could see blood oozing from where Zwei's teeth were sinking in. The large man was flailing his arm around all over the place, trying to get her dog off of him. He brought up his left fist and brought it down to hit her friend, but at the very last moment, Zwei jumped away from where he had bitten her, causing the man to howl in pain as Zwei had fooled him to hitting himself on the fresh wound that he had created. Yang's eyes widened in horror. As she saw the man beginning to pull out his weapon, she immediately knew that he was a huntsman, and if she stayed here, then it was very likely that both her and Zwei would be killed. Getting up with her newfound strength that her fear had given her, she ran over to Zwei and scooped him up in her arm. She turned around to the town's entrance and ran as fast as her legs could carry her. As she ran, the people of Bram were throwing rocks as she went by them. Finally, she made it out of the gate and ran out as she heard a gunshot. She flinched as she felt a bullet graze her cheek, a thin line of blood dripping from her wound. After a few minutes of running, Yang stopped. After she let Wai jump out from her arm, She dropped to her hands and knees. Sweat was dripping from her face as she gasped for air. She had never ran so fast in her entire life. Taking a few minutes to regain her breath, she rose up to her feet. She looked back in the direction of the town. Yang then turned her head towards the direction of her home. She began her journey back home with her shoulders slumped forward and the head hanging low. She never wants to come to this town again.